Since we're talking about water, may as well bring water up. How you all doing? Hello, you're awake? You're here to talk about water? I've been talking about water for a while. Hello. I'm Mustakeem. I'm here to keep us awake. On top of joining my colleagues to talk about water. Water made America, but it unmade the world. Water gives people power. It gives people power to manipulate the moment, the space, and beyond. So where I'm going, there will be no pictures. I'm going to tell some stories. I'm going to keep it within 10 minutes. But at the same time, I'm going to remind us of something that I've written in multiple spaces about water. In 2011, I had an article come out in a British journal that not one American journal saw value in the death of a Black woman's story. A Black woman who was thrown overboard off of a slave ship because she had smallpox. I'm telling you saw the comments that I saw. Who cares about this Black woman? Why should we care? What's so bad about this? What is it that a British journal would see value in it? Now, the reason why I'm starting there is we're thinking about not water justice, water injustice. How water kills, how water is a weapon. That's really where I want to start because there's no rainbows and lollipops in what I do. I studied the 18th century, I studied slavery and slavery at sea. I am quite fascinated what people do when they think nobody is looking. In the corner, out in the middle of the river, in the ocean, behind closed doors, is there really a such thing? But yet, out in the middle of the sea, everybody's not going to see those moments. So in 2011, I had this article come out. She must go overboard and shall go overboard. Diseased bodies and the spectacle of murder at sea. And it's a very horrifying story. It looks at, essentially, looking at a 26-year-old, a ship captain, who several weeks into the passage discovered that a Black female, a middle-aged female who was reduced to a Negro wench, that she held no value at that moment, and therefore they decided, his name is James DeWolf. He is from Rhode Island. If anyone has ever seen the documentary Traces of the Trade, we're pointing directly to him. And he is one of the biggest financial connectors to 3 generations of a family intricately connected with the slave trade. So now where I want to go though, is as we're thinking about water, I want to pull back for a moment. Within grad school, it was all about the movement of people, goods, and ideas. But most people forgot the water. You're not walking across water while some of us believe we can. We weren't. So we were bypassing the very space. But then we go to, what do we think when we think of water? Deep blue sea, dolphins, cruise ships, good times, blood, bones, secrets that are buried in the bottom of the ocean, bottom of rivers. What else? My mind. I was taking a shower. I was in water. The water just really has come alive. For most people, I hope that the world would think of Emmett Till. In 1955, for a lot of people, water would be connected to be tied to a cotton gin and thrown in the water. But this case, 165 years earlier, in 1790, between 1791, James DeWolf, again, he would decide that this Black woman had to not only be removed from the ship, but it was even more visceral. To tie a mask around your eyes and your mouth, and tie you to a chair, and then order your crew to lower her down. And when they lowered her down, she was still alive. She hadn't died from smallpox. They quarantined her. So this article that I've written that is really chronicles, only 1 or 2 articles in the world that looks at a Black female's experience aboard a slave ship. It is history and herstory above and below line. Because again, we take for granted, we're just getting there. But we totally have not considered, again, what people do out in the middle of the ocean, miles and worlds away. So again, after lowering this woman off of the ship, they sailed away. Left her for dead. Of course she died. In the middle of the ocean, tied to a chair, sharks or whatever, rolled up, they got a feast. That moment, yes, it would change the course of a lot. DeWolf, he would be brought up on charges. Interestingly, one of the sailors, there was talk, and eventually a grand jury convened, and DeWolf escaped. He essentially continued his work beyond America. And he would write his lawyer, and then there actually was another case in St. Thomas. He was acquitted in St. Thomas. They said he did it for the good of the ship. And then the American side of it, the same thing happened. The case was now crossed. I mean, as soon as he got back, he married the daughter of the governor of Rhode Island. And essentially this man died the second richest man in the country in 1837. So in 2011, when I wrote that article, I was really trying to center a Black female's experience within the Middle Passage and to make central water as a zone of death. Now, 12, 13 years later, not only did I realize that I was preparing the future to begin to embrace even a conversation of race and quarantine and disease, of which we had nothing, and now it becomes, whoa, it's so applicable as we are looking back on a pandemic, but at the same time, then it becomes why it's the only story that we're telling, and what does it mean when one nation doesn't want to talk about it, and then another will. Where are we going in it? Do we really know? What do we know? Whose story do we know? How are we telling it? So as I'm thinking about water itself, it is not only the tactics, but I'm really looking at water as, yes, a grave, but as a weapon, a very powerful weapon, which can permanently seal any evidence at all. Gone, completely gone, as if it never happened. So I'm working on essentially 2 essays, and one of them, I'm really arguing for water being perhaps one of the most potent weapons of slavery that we've never considered. There is a person, not just a man, yes, women can also commit violence in the world of slavery. We also would think about arms, but as we think about water, then it takes on a whole other meaning. For certain people, water is raceless. However, it is race-filled when we are looking particularly at an enterprise that would go for 4 centuries, not just 1 year, 1 decade, or a century, but for 4 centuries. So as we're looking at where regulations are, the slave trade is the least regulated branch of commerce, as Robert Blackburn would remind us. And it's important for us to think about, again, what people do with water. So again, 12 years later, I'm trying to go even further. As the world now is really thinking about weapons, we have to look at how slavery was the pre-shadow for so much more. And one of the biggest things, essentially justifiable homicide. We know it now, but the acquittal of a murder for the good of a business, that is justified homicide all over again for the good of. And in fact, if I were to borrow from Marcus Rediker, I would argue that James DeWolf made a deal between the devil and the deep blue sea, because this would change his future. The depositing of a Black woman would then create a whole other future for him. Now, of course, we won't ever know, what if he didn't do that? What if he didn't throw her over? What would it look like? What we are left to have to consider, though, is the aftermath, to go on and live one's life. Perhaps haunted. There's a story that goes through the DeWolf family that the wolf was haunted. I'm not quite convinced, but at the same time, again, if we're thinking about water, we do have to think about what is done on water, and then the memories that are made or silenced on land, and then just also in the evolution of a world and who we are. As I approach water, as I approach the telling of history and herstory, it really is thinking about what we don't want to talk about, what doesn't make us comfortable, but yet what fits into an evolving pattern of human behavior. So I teach medical history, I teach women in crime in American history, I teach slavery and memory in American popular culture, and this article, again, that no American journal saw value, my students then begin to reckon with, what have we been taught that we don't know these stories, but that we leave people reduced to a singular understanding of, oh, the slaves, or, oh, well, you know, they were out in the water and then thankfully they made it somewhere. But there is, in my book, In Slavery at Sea, I really argue for the making and the unmaking of freedom and people. As I'm also getting us to think about this enslaved woman, I also cannot forget the impact on those who detonated violence, on those who saw, bore witness to, and then to carry that on all sides. It becomes important for the future, and then what it is that we know, what it is that we tell ourselves. Again, as I was going in my mind today to really sort of think about water, where are we? How do we think about it? How do we think about it violently? And that may not be comfortable to say, but as we think about waterboarding, as we think about water itself as this tactic to take life, Yes, water can be life-giving, but it also can be life-taking by, well, let's just say circumstances that other people put into motion for that to happen. And what I hope I'm doing is to trouble the waters. So that way I don't want us to be comfortable with these blue sea, peaceful narratives. There's nothing peaceful when you had centuries of human beings. Yes, you had the transatlantic slave trade, but for many centuries, we have people crossing the Atlantic and then making histories and herstories all over. So I know I'm right at time, and I know we'll have a whole lot to talk about, but water is a weapon that we need to remember in slavery's history, and then even more beyond. All right, thank you.